We will now be moving to the first presentation of the day, which will basically take us into the basics of circularity. This is looking at circularity 101, what it is and why it matters for businesses. And the presentation will be made by Andrew McNaught, who is the founder of Tandem Circular Consulting. He is also the chapter lead for the African Circular Economy Network in Zambia. As Andrew makes his way to the podium, allow me to just briefly introduce him. Andrew has over a decade of years of experience working with startups, developing sustainable business models across Africa. He has successfully managed many development and private sector projects, especially in the renewable energy space, with a focus on waste management, recycling, renewable energy, and clean cooking. He is a circular economy innovator and practitioner, working on developing more efficient, closed-loop systems across Africa. Andrew, over to you.
Morning, everybody. So exciting to see so many friends and familiar faces around the audience. This forum has been in the making for some years now. Thank you again to our sponsors, the Green Tech for Circular Economy program underneath European Union. And good to have you all here. So I'm going to try and run you through a little bit what is circular economy. Ideally, I know with some of you we may be preaching to the choir, but at least then we can all get on the same page and understand exactly what are we talking about here when we look at circular economy. What we'll be covering today, right now I've got my ASIN hat on, the Africa Circular Economy Network. And today we'll be looking at, firstly, what is ASIN? What are we aiming to do across the continent? Then a quick introduction to circular economy, and then focusing on business models that you can actually apply in practice to help your business, your clients, your suppliers, your customers to be more green and circular. Okay, so basically ASIN is a group of circular economy practitioners across the continent. We've got quite a wide representation across most of the continent. Maybe important just to touch on that the local chapter here, also under the Zambia Circular Economy Network, is very open to collaboration, and we're looking for members, passionate people who are going to help to drive the circular economy and green growth across Zambia. So, what is circular economy? Basically, as the population grows, as the earth develops, we need materials, we need resources to fuel that growth. And our earth has finite, certain resources that are finite. So things like minerals, fossil fuels and the likes. There's only a certain amount of them available on the earth. The model that has been in operation for some time now is a linear take, make, use, dispose model, where we extract resources, we produce goods and products from those, we use them, and then once we're done, we dispose of them. And so, for example, in these pictures that I'm showing you here, someone from the audience, who can tell me what all four of these pictures have got in common? Hand up, anyone? Want to take a guess? Yes, Kennedy. Energy. Yes, they may all take energy to produce and to use, but basically these are all showing different materials. We've got electronics, textiles, furniture, and agricultural produce in there. So if you look at the resources that we have on our planet, generally if you can break it down into 5 or 6 main categories. You've got things like biomass, crops and the likes, fossil fuels, coal, oil, and so on. Metals, very important ones like copper, non-metallic metals like sand and so on that are essential for construction, things like cement production, land and water. Now, all those, the first 4 are all materials that are extracted, and some of them renewable, like biomass. We can always plant more and grow more crops and so on. Some of them non-renewable, such as fossil fuels. Now, This here shows the growth in extraction of materials since the 1970s. And as you can see, significant growth, especially in non-metallic minerals. So what this picture tells us is we're extracting more and more materials from the earth. This I find quite interesting. So this is looking at critical materials. And obviously this is a really interesting topic for Zambia. You know, we're very reliant on copper production and so on to fuel our economy. We're also a strategic partner to supply the world with the minerals that they need for the renewable energy transition. So this here shows some of the essential minerals that are needed for that. So, for example, the copper that's so popular in Zambia is essential for solar PV panels, for wind turbines, for other bioenergy, for electricity, for electric vehicles and batteries and so on. So really, we have a resource here in Zambia that is going to drive the renewable energy transition. Now, the issue with this take, make, dispose linear economy that we've been talking about is, again, it's extractive. There's pollution and so on associated with it. And actually, we have these fantastic materials that we've paid a lot to, and later in the day, we'll be talking about mining and other interesting activities, manufacturing and so on, and energy that are part of the conference today. And what we want to do is, when these get to the end of life, is we want to see how we can make the most of these resources that we've paid so much to extract and to manufacture into products and use and so on. Basically, what we need is, firstly, to understand the various materials better. And actually, the concept of waste doesn't exist in nature. If you look at where we are today, we're benefiting from hundreds and thousands of years of nature just doing its thing, you know, trees growing, dropping their leaves, that sort of looking at the water cycles and other biocycles and so on. So nature is circular in the way it operates, and waste is a relatively new concept. So now we get into the interesting stuff around circular economy and what is that. Okay, so circular economy is also an interesting one because, what do we mean when we talk about this? And actually, there's, a bit more to it. It's definitely not just recycling, and we'll be covering that later. I think a lot of people that we speak to, especially here, think that it's just waste management and recycling, but actually it's so much more than that. Can be a little bit confusing. So if you look around and online, I think there's somewhere like over 200 definitions around what it is. We generally follow this definition that it's an economic system that uses a systemic approach to maintain a circular flow of resources by recovering, retaining, or adding to their value while contributing to sustainable development. Now, a lot of big fancy words in there. And I was very fortunate to be at the World Circular Economy Forum last week in Brazil. I think there was mention of that earlier in the day. And one of the things that was funny from the time there is a lot of this sustainability lingo, let's say. One of the jokes we were making is we should actually make bingo cards that we can play during the audience, because you get a lot of these buzzwords that are thrown out. But actually, what do they mean? So let's unpack this a little bit. So economic system, so essentially looking at the entire economy of a nation, of a continent, of the globe. Systemic approach. So that's not just singular or focusing on one specific aspect. It's looking at the entire system and how do we change the system. Circular flow. So how do we get resources and materials to continue cycling? So again, when they get to the end of life, that we can recover them, we can remanufacture into something new, we can repair, we can reuse, and we'll be getting into some of those practical things in a little bit. And keeping that value that we've invested so much in accessing. We'll be hearing from some speakers on mining, and again, going back to the case of copper, but by the time we get to the point where you can have a cell phone in your hand, I think actually one of these has probably traveled around the world 2 to 3 times, if I remember, if you look at all of the materials and the footprint and all of that. So a lot goes into making these resources. So how can we prolong the life of this device and make sure that it stays in use and existence for as long as possible? what we'd also like to do is get into sort of some of the practicalities. How do you incorporate circular economy into your daily lives? And how do you incorporate this into your businesses that you're running, your operations, and how do you benefit from that? And there's some small practical examples, and I think a lot of us will be looking at things like recycling our waste at home, composting, and things like that. I mean, something I always try and do is carry a reusable coffee cup with me so that we don't have to get a cup that we throw away. And this cup can be used many times and washed. And actually, there's funny, I went to Vida the other day with one of these, and they actually gave me a discount on my coffee. So there's sometimes financial incentives to that. So you can save by using these. Again, we've asked everyone today to bring their own water bottles. Hopefully you have, if not, we have some glasses and so on, but there's dispensers where you can refill your water. So again, looking at that rather than using single-use plastic bottles. But there's a lot of other ways that you can incorporate this, and that's what we're going to dive into now. So again, just aligning on some of the definitions. So one of the terms that we often hear is around the green and blue economy. So we would look at this as sort of an overarching concept. Okay, so green economy on land, blue economy for the oceans, and essentially encompasses all underneath there. In Zambia, for example, we look at this as falling underneath some of the green growth and so on. And actually, very excitingly, we've just launched our national green growth strategy last year. And if anyone hasn't read it, I can really recommend doing that. Firstly, there's a lot of really interesting stats and so on around where we're at the moment and some of the challenges, but also some really practical and tangible actions that we can take forward. So again, green economy is sort of the overarching concept. We look at circular economy more as a tool, something practical that you can apply in your businesses, in your operations, in what you do day to day in work and in life. Now, the subset of the tools would be circular economy business models, and we'll get back into those, or we'll get into those a little bit later. And so things that were mentioned, around reuse, recycling, and so on, these are, again, practical tools that you can apply to that. And then obviously we spoke a lot about materials and how we reuse and recycle and keep those in loops and so on. So that sort of falls into the ecosystem and biodiversity. Okay. So I'd mentioned this before. Circular economy is not recycling. It's so much more. So looking at that. So some of the key principles of circular economy, designing out waste. So again, reusable coffee cup. You don't need to get one that you then get and throw away. Same thing with a water bottle. No need for a plastic water bottle if you have one that you can just refill. And actually, there's some fantastic cases in Zambia of businesses that have implemented these kind of strategies into their operations. So Manzi Valley, for example, they've got a completely circular packaging system. So they moved away from single-use disposable water to large format bottles that they'll deliver right to your door. Once you've done with that, you can send it back. They'll clean it, they'll refill it. And if that bottle breaks, they can actually make it into a new bottle in their factory just here in Lusaka. So interesting cases of that. Second concept, keeping materials in use at their highest value. So again, I spoke about the phone. Let's keep this working as a phone for as long as possible, because as soon as we have to do something else with it, it becomes very complicated. It's a huge mix of various different materials. And actually later in the day, we'll be hearing from a couple of people who are working with e-waste collection and recycling. So we'll hear a bit more about that. Then we're also looking to regenerate natural systems. So I mentioned, the nature is inherently circular. So let's see how we can learn from that and keep those systems in place. So, for example, there's a lot happening on the ground here around regenerative agriculture, conservation farming, and other terms that they use. But yeah, some interesting stuff to look at there. And again, ideally, all of this should benefit all members of society. So we're looking at a just transition to circular economy as well. So I think, Yeah, I'm looking at time, and we're trying to make sure that we can catch up and also not delay you from your tea break. And after this, we've got a very interesting video that'll share some highlights from the World Circular Economy Forum. So I think some of this technical stuff I'm going to skip through. But if anyone does want to know more, please come and find me after, during the tea break, during lunch. We can set up a time in the near future to chat more about the details. But I think I'll skip through this quickly. But this basically highlights the potential of a circular economy and looking at the different ways to move from that linear economy and look at how we can reduce extraction of materials by designing products to use less. We can create loops in production cycles where we're getting back materials or products that are no longer in use and reusing those. We can also look at repair, remanufacture. So basically, and I'll show you a breakdown of this, but it extends a lot beyond the 3 R's as well: reduce, reuse, recycle. Actually, there's 10 of them, but I'll show you a little table that summarizes that helps with framing that thinking. So getting into some of the more practical stuff, how do we implement circular economy into our day-to-day lives, into our businesses, into our operations? So generally there's 6, maybe some more depending on how you define them, but practical ways that you can look at this and apply this to what you're currently doing or new businesses, new activities, new projects. The first one is around materials and your supply. So what inputs, what resources do you need, what materials, looking at your supply chain. Can you try and switch from linear products to circular ones? So products that are renewable, that can be recovered or that can biodegrade. So, and a really good example of this, there's a Dutch company that produces an equivalent to plastic from plants. So literally molecularly exactly the same. And we'll see a video on that a little bit later, which is why I'm trying to hurry up as well. But can we come up with a renewable raw material, something that comes from a resource that we can regenerate, rather than one that is finite and that needs to be extracted? The second one is product as a service, and I think probably the most exciting space for us at the moment is looking at things like solar as a service. I mean, in Zambia, the load shedding has really hit us all very hard. But if you look at things like productive assets, leasing of solar panels and so on. And I see we've got Jeff and Mark in the audience here. If you ever want to chat to anyone about asset financing and leasing and all of that, both of them have got incredible experience in that space. But we'll be, again, touching on that a little bit later. But something like leasing out solar panels would make it much easier for people to move to solar and scale that up hugely. Product life extension. So again, how can you firstly design better products, but also once a person or a business doesn't need them anymore, how can someone else use that? How can you repair it and so on? So all of those other R's fall under that, basically trying to keep this in use as long as possible. Sharing platforms. So for example, and this is where we've really seen a lot of growth in recent years. So examples like Uber, Yango, Airbnb, these are all making use of existing assets and bringing people together so that someone who has a car and someone who wants a ride can connect, and that person then doesn't need to get a vehicle of their own, essentially. Resource recovery, we spoke about that quite a bit as well. So that is where the recycling and so on comes in. And the other good thing to note is actually you can mix a lot of these. So you don't need to apply necessarily one strategy to your business, but you could look at multiple. And I'm sure it would be interesting to discuss if anyone is thinking about how to practically implement this in your specific business. And this afternoon, we'll be hearing some case studies from interesting companies in Zambia who have either done this or are starting on their journey and hearing from them. But if you do want to look at how to implement this in what you're doing, we'd love to chat to you more about that. Okay, so let's take a practical example. Coffee. Coffee drinkers in the audience, hands up. Who had a coffee this morning? Okay, most of us. So it would be interesting to hear how you make your coffee, but and we'll get to the coffee break just now after the video, but there's a lot of different ways that you can make coffee, right? You've got fancy machines, and I see we've got a few Italians in the audience here. So, there's some of the more religious ones around how their coffee is made and so on. But, you've got the mocha pot, you've got the French press, you've got filter coffee, you've got an AeroPress on the right there. You've got Nespresso pods that make it really easy and quick and so on to do it. Now, maybe just quickly again by show of hands, in terms of the way to make your coffee that you would think is the best, the greenest, the most sustainable. So who would say using a machine, for example, like they have at the cafe here, who would say that's the best for making coffee? Okay, we have one here. Mocha pot. Who uses that? Okay, French press. We got a few more. Filter coffee. AeroPress. Does anyone here have an AeroPress or use one? Hey, Jeffrey at the back there. Good stuff. So actually, for me, one of my preferred methods would be this AeroPress. Okay, now, why is that? Does anyone want to hazard a guess why I would choose this as one of the more circular options to make your coffee? Very good. Okay, so it doesn't require energy. You just need to push it with your hand. Okay. Any other guesses? Sorry, John? Yeah. This is true. Okay, so you'll need hot water to get into that and so on. So I was speaking with someone earlier this morning, and they were saying it's time for us to move back to bicycle-powered energy. So I can imagine you sitting there with a dynamo or something on your bike in the morning, getting your workout and using that to boil the kettle. So one of the interesting things about this, as an example, and I'm not getting a commission from AeroPress on this or anything, but I'm not expecting you to go out and do this, but their model, actually, they have a lot of spare parts and very easily to replace if something breaks. And at least personally, I've got 2 or 3 coffee machines sitting in the cupboard where one tiny little screw is broken and I can't find that little piece. The seal is gone because it's rubber and it sort of hasn't lasted. So again, this is a really interesting one because they make it very easy to get spares and so that you can carry on using that same machine. Okay, so again, that would be an example of product life extension where you can keep that in use as long as possible. Okay, so I mentioned the 10 R's. I'm not going to get into this in too much detail because I've got some case study videos that I'd like to show you, which I think talk to this a lot more than anything else. So let's do that.
Maersk Line will implement the most comprehensive cradle-to-cradle passport ever seen for the new giant EEE ships. The cradle-to-cradle passport will identify each and every nut and bolt of the giant 60,000-ton ships, making vastly improved recycling possible for most materials as well as safe disposal for the rest. The materials of the ships will all be marked and numbered, separating high and low-grade steel, copper wiring, hazardous materials, and waste. Based on the sorting, it will be possible to reuse nearly all materials for new ships, making dangerous and polluting scrapping a thing of the past.
So what I love about this is it illustrates how it can happen at scale. Now imagine that, an entire shipping tanker that's designed to be, with every single part of it designed to be recovered, remanufactured, repaired, recycled into something new. I remember seeing a little while back a video of some of these tankers and what happens at end of life. And this one in particular had basically been driven onto a beach in India. And you had people by hand with some even little saws, literally disassembling this entire ship. So again, very interesting to see how this can happen at scale. Okay, so this is an example from South Africa, from a company that's using waste product from a coal power plant to produce construction materials. And some of these stats are really interesting. So obviously in South Africa, they're very reliant on coal. Here in Zambia, we've got Mamba power plant. But they, through recycling the byproducts from that, can reduce carbon emissions by up to 80% and make bricks that are actually stronger. So it's a superior product with an environmental benefit. Very interesting stuff. So we'll hear about.
All right, the business is called Samanjalo, which means we stand firm and we continue standing. So what we do as an organization, we take the coal waste or waste from material that is everywhere around Mpumalanga, and we convert that into usable products, environmentally friendly products. When I hear my guys talking about the mountains, the ash mountains, which initially they never thought, what are they? And then they are able to say, we are making a difference because we are taking that and we're putting it into a product. To me, that's mission accomplished. So it's big in the just transition, simply because this is a mining town. So if you're not dealing with the waste that comes out of such a town, you are basically just, you're closing the doors. So what we do with the circularity is just to make sure that economy still grows, people have got employment, and meaningfully so. And more than anything, they also understand the impact that they have in the environment.
A toast. Here's to the bakers letting nothing go to waste, changing the world one slice at a time. To the brewers going against the grain, fermenting change with every barrel. To the landlords pouring our beers, putting the world to rights. To the punters raising a glass down the local, saving the planet over a pint. To everyone who wants to change minds, change the system, change the world. Here's to a beer with more taste and a world without waste. Cheers.
So I love this one, and I don't know how many beer drinkers we have in the audience. I know some of us prefer the lighter stuff, but they basically take waste bread from manufacturers and turn that into an entirely new product, beer. So very interesting again.
If we all took a moment to listen carefully and ask the Earth, what does your future look like? This is what she'd answer. The fossil fuels it took me 300 million years to create are almost entirely gone after 200 years. So what are you still looking for inside of me? Get your heads out of the ground and look for growth where you will always find it. Once you discover the potential there, we can all really start making progress. We are Avantium, and we've listened carefully. We invent wonderful things, like plastics that aren't made from oil or gas, but from plants, wood chips, and even CO2. They're lighter, stronger, and better for everyone. That's green chemistry. Renewable chemistry. We're going to change the world. And this is just the beginning. Do you want to be part of it? Because the future of plastics lies above the ground. The only way is up. Avantium.
So this is that Dutch company that I mentioned earlier that's making alternatives to plastic from plant-based materials. Again, a good example of changing your supply chain so that it can be completely renewable.
In a windy corner of West Zealand, in Denmark, lies the city of Kalundborg. It's here an industrial symbiosis has shared the surplus of excess resources for more than 50 years. Our planet needs new solutions. We must transform our production to thrive in the 21st century. That's why Kalundborg aims to be the world's leading industrial symbiosis. By symbiosis, We understand a partnership where our partners provide, share, and reuse resources. As public and private companies are physically connected, one company's surplus of resources adds value to another. Kalundborg's global companies collaborate with local businesses and authorities across sectors to solve some of the biggest challenges we are facing today. Large industrial companies share excess energy, water, and materials, so less goes to waste. Today, more than 20 different streams of resources flow between the companies. Every year, our efforts reduce thousands of tons of CO2 emissions, and we are aiming for full resource utilization and zero waste within the next decades. The symbiosis model also creates the trust and power of innovation within the community, for the employees involved, for students, and for researchers. We are proud that our model already inspires people from other countries, but we would like to spread it further. Nothing is more evolving than new partners eager to experiment, innovate, and share with us. In Kalundborg Symbiosis, sustainability, growth, and profit go hand in hand. That is what we believe should be the new normal. But most of all, we hope our local efforts can be an example of best practice and multiplied in similar symbioses around the globe, demonstrating local solutions to our global challenges.
So that's another interesting one. Again, seeing how circular economy can be applied at scale across multiple industries. And they've been doing this for 50 years already. So again, it's not necessarily a new concept, and seeing significant benefits in terms of cost savings, carbon emission reductions, and so on. And looking at the case of Zambia, I know there's a lot of growth happening in these, what we would call here, multi-facility economic zones. In the next video, you'll hear a little bit about some of the benefits that have come from Mexico in what they call free trade areas or free trade zones. So they'll be touching on that. But I think, again, there's huge potential in places like that where you have industry in close proximity, and they all have similar needs, energy, steam, water, raw materials. And again, a lot of them have byproducts and waste streams that can actually feed into other companies or processes. And yeah, so I think that's it. Hopefully we've managed to explain a little bit more what circular economy is. Again, sometimes it can get a little bit technical, so if anyone wants to chat more, please come and find us. The rest of the team is also here. Maybe Drew and Noel, if you can just stand up quickly, and so that people can see you. If you want to find out a bit more about circular economy and how you could apply it in your daily life and your business, please feel free to reach out to them. Linda's around as well. She's outside ushering people in, so feel free to chat to her as well. And yeah, let's see how we can together make Zambia a greener and more circular place. Thanks everyone for your time.
I would like to thank Andrew. He did give us a very comprehensive overview of what the circular economy is, what it is not. It is not just recycling. He talked about how it extends beyond the linear economic model that we typically look at in terms of take, make, and dispose. He highlighted quite a number of key elements or principles related to circularity. So innovations around leasing, around sharing, principles around how we maximize the use of materials, using them for as long as we possibly can, designing out waste. He also talked about regenerating natural systems. So a lot of concepts, and I think the video further consolidated the concept of circularity, giving us a lot of examples from across the globe in terms of what's being done.